What is going on, Cultivate family? Welcome back to another episode of the podcast. I'm sorry it's a little bit late. So I've got a repeat guest on for you this week, and you might remember last time Reanne Francis was on, we had some pretty bad audio quality issues, and we also recorded the podcast like 3 times. So we got it back for a redo, and of course, Sod's Law, we had more issues, but it doesn't matter because this is an awesome episode and I managed to fix all the issues. When Reanne was on the podcast last time, she was training for an ultramarathon, something she had never ever done before. And she took herself from a hip injury all the way from accumulating a 10K to running an eventual ultramarathon that was 73 miles in total. And she's come back on today to talk about that whole process. So hybrid training, strength training, whilst training for the ultra. She talks about nutrition, fueling, mistakes that she made. We talk about raw dogging and bonking, and take what you will from that, but I promise it all has substance. This is maybe one of my favorite conversations I've had in so long, and I'm very, very excited for you to dive in. So without further ado, let's get into it. Mate, thank you so much for coming back on. We're going to have much better sound quality this time because we had so much teething issues last time.
Too much.
I've brought you back on because in the time that since we did the last podcast and now, you had just started training for an ultra and now you've done it. So I just wanted to get into the thick of everything with you. Am I right in saying you would only ever run 10Ks and your mate asked you to run 113 kilometers, like an ultra marathon, which is 70 miles for anyone that uses miles, and you only had 6 months? Is that right?
Yeah, pretty much. I think it was about 9 months maybe. So, but the 6 months taking me from the 10K distance to the 113 is right. Yeah. So I'd literally only just done like 10Ks, never ran more than that. And it does sound mad when you say it out loud, doesn't it? You just like, someone just asked me, "Hey mate, do you want to do an ultra?" And I was like, "Yeah, why not?" So it's not a normal thing, is it?
It's not, but you know what? Like, if at the end of this call you was like, "Lucinda, do you want to do an ultra?" I would find it really hard to say no when someone actually asks you.
Yeah.
I don't know why that is. Is it a peer pressure thing, or is it just because it kind of sounds fun and attractive at the start?
Yeah, but I think it's the naivety of it as well. Like, because I'd only ever done 10Ks. So it was literally just a case of, I have no idea what I'm getting myself into. So let's just do it.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is, like, when you're trying to run 113K in one race, like, the training for that is a lot of time and prep, especially alongside like work and life, because the training sessions are going to be long, the miles are going to be long, you're going to be more tired.
Yeah, 100%. It's literally just a case of like, if you've never touched on any of those distances, you have no idea how it feels. So it kind of works in your favor if you do agree to do something that you've never done before, because you have no idea how much it hurts.
Yeah, you don't know what you're about to put yourself through.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, so you say 6 months from the time that you ran 10K, was that because you had an injury to sort out in the first 3 months?
Yeah. So when I first reached out to my coach, and I'd already agreed to do the ultramarathon, but at the time I had like a nagging hip/groin injury. But I knew that with the right people in my corner, I could work through it. So essentially, I can't remember how I did it. I think it was maybe from climbing or something like that. And it was just nagging away. And luckily, my friend who I did the ultra with, he's an osteopath. So he basically told me what movements to avoid, what movements to work through. So when I reached out to my coach, we kind of worked together to construct a plan where there was no time and feet whatsoever for the first 8 to 10 weeks. And it was just about slowly loading the hip and just working through a certain movement pattern so that we weren't causing more inflammation, we weren't aggravating it, and was giving the hip enough time to get to full health again. And I was actually looking through my archive on Instagram because I was trying to think, I was like, when was the first time that I actually started building time on my feet? And I literally have on my Instagram archive, like the 16th of August, 2023, that was the first run that I had with 0 hip pain. And it was literally just walking for 3 minutes, jogging for 2 minutes, times 3, like super, super, super basic. So it was from that point up until December 23, where I'd only just slowly started to get around maybe 30 minutes on my feet with 0 hip pain, maybe 45, maybe an hour. So I was pushing nowhere near like past 10K up until the point of Christmas 23. And then from a training instructor perspective, we still made sure that I was building the capacity in my lungs, but it just wasn't coming, through my feet. So I'd do zone 2 on the bike and everything else like that. And I do remember I had a 10-kilometer time trial in that time, and it was pretty much the back end of the year, because I remember I fucked up royally by again doing the 10-kilometer time trial on a curved runner. Um, so that was fun, but we'll talk about that later on when we touch on fuck ups and stuff. But the 6 months taking me from 10 kilometers to the 113, it's so bizarre thinking back to it now, because you don't really, it kind of creeps up on you. You don't really realize it's happening, because week to week, basically, how my training was structured was I'd have 3, maybe 4 strength training sessions. Obviously, closer to the time of the big day, you taper back on strengths to like 2 or 3. But for the most part, I was getting in 4 strength sessions per week, but I would have, the back end of 2023, I had 2 conditioning sessions. One was like a speed work or like VO2 max off my feet. And then the second was the jogging and walking, just slowly trying to build up to sort of 0 hip pain. And then the 6 months where we went from the 10 kilometers up to, the big day of 113, that was literally 3 runs a week. So one was steady state to end the week. That was like a long steady state. And it was just gradually taking me from that 10-kilometer point and just slowly taking me all the way up to, I think the longest run that I did was 50 kilometers.
I remember following the stories for that one. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was really cool. So that was one that was at Kinder Scout. That was a really cool run. And ideally, me and my coach said probably could have done with maybe doing about 60-ish, maybe 65, because you always want to get to that sort of around halfway point. You never want to exceed that. But I just felt so awesome in that 50-kilometer run. And it was just like a case of slowly, week after week, just building up. And then I think we had like a rotation of 3 weeks was a volume build. So you'd do like a couple more kilometers every week, and then you'd come down again. But then it was kind of gradually this pyramid of slowly accumulating volume over time. And then before I knew it, it was the big day.
Amazing. So like touching back on that hip injury and then being able to eventually run like that, for that amount of time without pain. How did you make the decisions around the threshold for that? Because obviously when you're rehabbing an injury, there is going to be a point where something maybe does feel uncomfortable, but it needs to not be the wrong flavor of uncomfortable that it leads to re-injury. So did you almost have like an internal like barometer of how you were listening to your body when the running was coming back?
Yeah, really good question, actually. I definitely had my reservations going back into it, because it was a very specific sort of discomfort that I had in my hip. And I felt like I was able to really articulate and define the difference between the pain of your hip just being sore because it's time on your hips and your feet over a long period of time. And it was just so acute. It was like inside the actual hip and the groin. And I think that internal barometer, it was more of a case of, does this actually cause me a lot of pain in one specific area as opposed to the general area, if that makes sense. And I think that was the only thing that I was going off in terms of building that volume, because it was inevitable. I spoke to my coach about it. I researched it. When you're building time on your feet are going to get really sore, your knees, your hips. But the best things that you can do is just making sure that you're actually warming up, you're fueling, and you've got the right shoes. And I think as soon as I was able to run pain-free, whilst I had the hip injury, I just made like a mental note and a mental blueprint of what that injury felt like, so that when I started running, if I felt that again, I knew that I was actually causing more chronic damage and had not really fully healed. But luckily that never happened.
Yeah. So is that down to purely just accumulating the right amount of volume and not being impatient, essentially, I guess a lot of that?
Yeah, I think it definitely comes down to that, because when I tried to do like running goals and stuff in the past, I was just kind of winging it. And I knew like little bits, and this is taking me up to my 10K, but I used to be so sort of hot-headed back in the day, where I just, be training CrossFit or whatever, like, right, I'm just going to go run a 10K off the cuff. But that's like the worst thing that you can do. Like, I knew that I could do it, but it wasn't the best way of going about it. And I think for sure, post-injury, one of the best things that you can do is just make sure that you just reverse engineer from that end goal or date that you have and strip it right back to, week after week. How can you gradually accumulate? Because if you try to do too much too soon, you'll definitely get that injury come back in way sooner than you want it to.
Yeah, and there's going to be a lot of people listening to this that are going to relate massively to that. I know that I do. I remember like years and years ago, I was doing like 25 minutes twice a week and just building up. And I just remember one day feeling really good and doing a 10K instead of a 5K and just like paying the price for it for about a month after. It's like that is one that I'll never make again. But you mentioned training wise, so you were doing, was it 4 strength, 2 conditioning, and was there runs as well once you had healed up injury wise?
Yeah. So during the injury, the conditioning sessions they were still laid out the same as it would be for a running session, but it was just off the feet. So it was like steady state on the bike. And I think what else did I have? I'm pretty sure I lived on the bike for a long time, and we did a little bit more of the sort of conditioning finishes at the end of the sessions. And then I was doing 4 strength sessions, and those strength sessions in particular always had the movements in that was gradually progressing my sort of injury rehab to get closer. Because at one point I couldn't even back squat, and that's like quite the meat and potatoes of how I train now with
Yeah,
lifting and stuff. So it was even stripping back from big compound movements like that, and then bringing that in at the right time, and then aligning that with
hey Rudy.
hey Rudy, and aligning that with getting time on the feet. And then once I'd started running, the layout would pretty much stay the same. It would just be that the format or the modality, so to speak, would change from, being on the bike to just being on your feet and building volume there.
Totally. So when that running came back, was that pretty much a 6-session week for you?
Yeah. So we had like what my coach does, and it's something that I'm testing out with my clients. It makes a lot of sense, really. So something that my coach did with me was we always had a ratio of during the winter months, you have 4 strength training sessions and you have 2 conditioning. But as it gets closer to sort of spring, summer, you can reduce the strength sessions to 3, and then you increase up to 3 conditioning sessions. And it just kind of,
I like
depending
that.
on when your event is, it kind of gets you peak fitness ready and sort of like in the headspace for the thing that you're actually doing, rather than trying to just strength train 4 times a week and then 3 runs on top of that. So yeah, it was like solid 6 sessions per week. It would be 3. So it would always be 6 sessions, but it would just be strength goes down a bit and then the running goes up.
Running volume goes up.
Yeah.
And were you training 6 a week normally before you started factoring in the ultra stuff?
No. So actually I was training. I mean, I think the last time I trained like that was when I was doing competitive CrossFit.
Yeah,
And that was a long time ago. But the biggest difference now is that the actual goat of a coach that I have, Dan Reeve, he's so amazing at periodization, but on a big picture perspective. So despite me training 6 times per week, the strength numbers and everything else like that, it's always balanced in a way where you're not overtraining and you're actually giving your nervous system enough time to adapt between training phases. So that coupled with the slow and accumulative build of the running, I very rarely felt like I got weaker, because naturally, as you build the volume and time on your feet, your strength starts to dwindle, and you'll get to a point where like it's harder to maintain the same number. So you're just trying to just get in and get moving. But that ability to sort of think about the big picture scale for the strengths and manage that with the running, I think it all comes down to just having a look at the big picture and just making sure that you're factoring in what type of strength training you're doing and what impact that will have on your nervous system as well.
yeah, because frying your like central nervous system on like a massive lifting session and then going and trying to do a long run or like a threshold interval session the day after, the recovery is probably gonna take its toll on you. But I suppose the more specific you are with it, the easier it's going to be.
Yeah.
And we train very similarly. Both used to do CrossFit, now do more hybrid. How did you feel about keeping any of those CrossFit or like Ollie lifting or gymnastic elements in? Did you keep them in, or did you kind of just scale it all back to like your big compound lifts and accessories?
Yeah. So I literally, the one thing that I wanted to keep was ollie lifting. I just absolutely love it.
Me too.
Love it. It's amazing, isn't it? Like it's one of those things that I never get bored of it because there's always so many different things to think about. So that was like, I said to my coach, I said, ollie lifting has to be in there still. And I was I was happy to see the gymnastics go.
I'm still clinging on, but like that I'm still not as seasoned at them as you will be, so I'm still seeing those nice little improvements. So
Oh, that's
I'm getting
good.
there.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. I mean, like, I miss doing like strict handstand push-ups and what else do I miss
Do
gymnastics
you?
on? I don't to think about it. That's how bad it is. I think, yeah, to be fair, 'cause I did get to a point where I could bash out like 20 strict handstand push-ups and broken, but that was like the peak of my competitive phase, I guess. But it was just pretty much other lifting because again, like I know my coach quite well. I've known him for a few years and I know the style of training that he has. And I knew the big compounds like the back squats, deadlifts, everything else like that. He's got a very good blend of what I like. So the accessory work is like bodybuilding-esque. The compounds are in there. So you sprinkle some ollie lifting, and that was like my perfect session. So that's how I factor it in now.
Yeah, that's to be fair, that's exactly what I do with my
Yeah.
coach as well. I think it's quite a weird niche setup, and if you looked at someone's programming and it's like, like calf raises to failure supersetted with like toes to bar every minute on minute or something, it would make no sense. But I think sometimes when you've come from that background, there's a lot of different skill work that you can really like get your brain into, and getting rid of that would definitely, I feel like it would be a shame, like, no matter what you're training for, because it almost like, I don't know, it's almost like a puzzle, ollie
Yeah.
lifting sometimes, isn't it?
Oh yeah, it's amazing, and the thing is, it just gives you such a big base and foundation of stuff that you can do within the gym, and if it keeps you loving training, why not?
100%. Yeah, totally. And if it's like a big part of like your strength workouts, like it would just feel like there was a hole. And I think a lot of time people probably think when you train for something like this, you have to really alter everything that you do.
Yeah.
But the fact that you kept the elements in that like brought you joy and that you love chipping away at just shows that you don't have to get rid of all of that. And I suppose the other thing a lot of people worry about going from strength to like training for a marathon, never mind an ultra, is like losing muscle mass. And you already kind of touched on that a little bit. But what did that feel like for you over the 6 months? Did it really affect you, or did you not notice it, or did you not care because you were like tunnel vision with, end goal?
Really good question. I think I was very tunnel vision, and I knew going into this, I knew my physique would change from the beginning. Obviously, like being a coach, you just know these things will happen. But I knew, and especially with since CrossFit's come into the scene, and since you've got these massive guys doing triathlons, they can hold onto so much muscle tissue. It's so impressive. But I knew for me, like the reason why I was doing it was just purely wanting to enjoy the experience. And so if it meant that my physique was going to change because I was having more carbs and the running made my physique look a certain way, I was like, this is totally cool. But I knew that the underlying repetition of strength training was going to retain the muscle, even if it looked like my body changed quite a bit. I knew that going into it, like it would still be there, even though it sounds silly, but sometimes your mind can go down that route of like, oh God, well, what is going to happen to my physique? But I just trust in the process that as long as I strength train and if I commit to the running, when the running gets pulled back, the stress in the body will reduce. Therefore, my physique will change and come back. And it did very quickly, like super quickly,
Yeah.
which just goes to show how much stress goes in the body when you run stupid distances.
Yeah, massively. And it's interesting what you say about like a lot of the like CrossFit men coming into stuff like hybrid training and being able to retain like essentially almost like a bodybuilder's physique. But and then obviously you got people like a Nick Bear who's
Yeah.
like, he's spent, I don't know, what, 20 years, maybe more, like building the physique he has. And I think there can be a misconception that that's what a hybrid athlete looks like. But
Yeah.
he spent most of his life looking like that, building that body, and then he started running. And so it's kind of, I think sometimes there can be slight unrealistic expectations of what a hybrid athlete looks like.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Bodybuilders that
Absolutely.
have got into running is like again, just niche.
Yeah, for sure. And I was even saying to my mum yesterday, because she wants to do high rocks. We were watching a Nick Bear episode on YouTube, high
Oh
rocks,
yeah.
and she was just watching, and she was like, "So that ski erg thing," and then I could tell that she was looking at their body, and I was like, "Mum," I said, "Don't worry, you don't have to look like that to do high rocks." And just put it out there.
Yeah, and I think High Rocks is like actually quite interesting to go and people watch at, like, complete sidetrack, but like again, it's a lot of people that have strength trained for years and years and years, and then they've kind of dipped their toe in the functional world. And it's not everyone, but it's a lot of people. So
Yeah,
you do get these big hench lads that like rip their top off on the start line, and it almost just feels like that's the look. And then you look around and it's not.
yeah, 100%.
Rudy agrees. So so I wanted to ask how, like, your training affected, like, work-life balance, because ramping up to 6 days when you hadn't done that since, like, professional CrossFit days, did you feel like you had to sacrifice much?
Yeah, I did, to be fair. So the biggest sort of sacrifices that I kind of felt were when I had to plan the long Sunday runs. But I started to love them in all honesty, but there were definitely a few times where, because of Rudy, I was just like, man, I'm gonna have to plan, like, is someone gonna watch me? Hey, shush. I was like, is someone gonna have to watch him? Like, I had to think, and almost had to start putting pressure on myself in terms of time because of Rudy. So if I knew that he was at home by himself, I was like, man, like, I've got 30 kilometers to run. And ideally, I know that it'll be all right for about 4 hours, but after that, I have no idea. So
Yeah.
it was pretty stressful at times, but the strength training, that was always like a non-negotiable. I feel like that in throughout the week, that was fine. But the harder part laying onto that was the fact that you have those 3 runs per week as well. So knowing that I was putting so much time, energy, and effort into the strength training, the running, and I pretty much had, like, I don't want to say no social life, definitely still had a social life, but the dial just got changed a little bit. And
Yeah.
it was a case of trying to almost fuse in the runs with social life. So my friend that I was doing the ultra with, we'd sometimes do runs together, then we'd go for food, coffee, that sort of stuff. But you're pretty much guaranteed that when you get to a certain distance with those long runs, you haven't got much capacity at the end of that run for the rest of the day. Like, up to about 30 kilometers, it's not too bad. But after that, you're like, I'm spent. Like, I can't even read my messages in WhatsApp.
Yeah, from like a perspective of just, yeah, being able to be present for the people that you have in your life, like,
Mm.
did you find that made much of a difference, or did you find that they were pretty understanding about it?
You know, I think they were pretty understanding, because in the past, I definitely have been that type of person where I can lock in on something for like a good few months. And what I did actually do, I made a conscious effort to sort of tell the people closest to me, obviously, what I was doing, and then the fact that that would affect, the frequency and cadence I would previously see those. I made sure that I had that conversation. But what I made a conscious effort to do was almost try to sort of bring people in within my circle to sort of join me on the journey on, like, different bits. So my half marathon, for example, at the time, my mum and one of her work colleagues were working up towards doing a half marathon. And I think they'd done one in Sheffield. And I was like, oh, I'm going to book to do mine in Barcelona. Do you want to come? And they were like, oh, yes, amazing. So we ended up doing that together, which is so, so cool. And I think naturally, when you're so far in your fitness journey, you'll end up spending time with people that are into it, or you might have family members and friends that are as well. So I just kind of capitalized on that. I was like, right, how can I make a weekend out of this? Have fun and, make sure that I'm spending time with people that I love. And I made sure that wherever I could, as long as it wasn't too obscene, like the half marathon, for example, I capitalized on that. And then after that, it was a case of just the volume got so much. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to see you after the big day.
Yeah, just the sort of going into your bubble for, like, the last push type thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I guess that's very much a sacrifice that you gotta make when you're doing something that requires that much of your body, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. I think because naturally it's, again, like anything above 30 kilometers, the time it takes to do the run, but then the preparation to get all your admin squared away for your carbs, your clothes, and then just making sure that your recovery is there. And you could enjoy your social life to a certain point, but you just know that your battery is going to be running pretty low after a certain distance is ticked off. So it's only temporary as well, and that's what I said to myself. It's only temporary. And I'd say that more came in towards maybe May once the distances got pretty high.
And it was in
So
June.
yeah, it was in June.
Yeah.
It was in June. Yeah.
Yeah, so, a month and a half of just kind of being a bit more locked in and a few
Mm.
compromises is totally, totally not the end of the world for sure.
Yeah, for
Uh,
sure.
last little bit on training. In any of your training blocks, did you have any particular like setbacks or problems or just any times where you were like, I'm done?
Mm. Yeah, good question. I definitely did. I bonked a few times on my runs, and I think it was a 35-kilometer run, and it was definitely during the first quarter of the year because I remember it was dark, and I remember thinking on that 35-kilometer run, I'd made the mistake, and I got caught up in just this stupid mindset of trying to go for as long as possible to the halfway point without needing to fuel.
Okay.
So yeah, you know where this is going. And when I did that, obviously, your body depletes energy like there's no tomorrow. Even though you're moving at a steady pace and it's conversation pace, you're still just using so much energy. And I remember getting towards the 30-kilometer mark, my feet were in agony, my hips felt awful. And that wasn't like injury wise, it was just time with my feet. I think it was the first time that I were breaking into the 35K mark. So it was like uncharted territory, so to speak. And I remember thinking, like, I'm done. I can't do this. I was like, I'm going to have to stop. Like, this is awful. But then I had a moment. I was like, actually, there's a reason you feel like this. You've left it until halfway to fuel, and you're probably not well hydrated if you've been neglecting your carbs as well. And, that was a reality of it. And I was like, right, just put one foot in front of the other, just keep going. And then once I got through that and I realized that actually it was in my control why I bonked so hard and why I had those sort of feelings and emotions, I was like, right, okay, I can keep going. I just need to make sure that I'm actually just not being a knobhead when it comes to fueling, and just make sure that I
Totally.
actually do the basics to a high standard.
Yeah, I don't know if you feel the same, but your mind can feel so much stronger than your body. So it can almost make you feel like you're unstoppable. And then you might have those moments where actually, no, I need to like drink something and eat something.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And the thing is, like, the thing that I loved about the ultra running or just prepping for it is it felt like meditation because I never ran with music. Like, there was only one run where I think it's a time trial of some form. And I remember my friend Nick joined me on it. And we were trying to push the pace to get to a certain point. And the last kilometer, he gave me his headphones, and I was like, no, no, I don't. And he was like, trust me, he said, just put them on, just go. But prior to that, I'd never worn headphones because it just felt so, calming, and it felt like meditation almost. And then, like you said, you get caught up in your own thoughts. And then before you know it, you've gone 30, 45 minutes without any fuel. So it's just making sure that you've got that awareness of maybe on your Garmin, you've plugged it in for like reminders to come through because it's just so easy to
That's
forget.
smart.
Yeah,
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 the Garmin reminders is a great shout, actually.
yeah.
So zero music, podcast, audiobook, just nothing.
Nothing.
Raw dog in every run.
Yeah, raw. I love that saying, raw dogging. Yeah, I mean, I realized now in hindsight, when a lot of people are running, like, they're like, "What on earth are you mad?" Like, and I think for me, because I'm definitely that sort of person where I feel like I've got 1,000 thoughts in my mind's racing at 100 miles an hour, I just got into a really good rhythm of being able to sort of think things through in my head. So I got a lot of mental clarity in these runs. But the biggest reason why I don't listen to music is because of my breath work and my cadence. So, Chris Hinshaw from the CrossFit world?
No.
No. So he's basically the aerobic guy for all the big CrossFit athletes. And I went to a seminar of his and Matt Fraser's in 2019, I believe. Incredible. And he was just basically teaching you how to actually breathe when you run or whenever you do anything that tests your aerobic capacity. And a lot of it is just actually listening to the rhythm of your breath and making sure it aligns with your cadence. So for me, that is enough for my focus to lock in and just get lost with it. And honestly, the
Yeah.
amount of times where I've just lost so many hours because all I'm thinking about is, does my breath work match up with the cadence, or and vice versa? Or is my breath becoming too short because my cadence is going too quick? So I need to pull it back.
Interesting. Yeah, that's really cool. I will definitely go into a big hole about that later,
Mm.
because I have my cadence pulsing on my wrist,
Ah,
and as a musician, I can't listen to music when my cadence is on my wrist because it won't line up, and that will be horrible. So I tend
yes.
to do podcasts, but I don't actually feel like I take any of the information in. I
Yeah.
just feel like it's background noise, and then all I really pay attention to is the vibration. I don't have sound or anything, it just pulses every 2 beats, and I guess
Ah.
music head, that makes sense to me. What is the relation between cadence and breathing? How do you structure that?
So essentially, what you're trying to do, you're trying to marry up a certain rhythm of your breath so that you will internally know if you're going too fast or too quick. So when I went to this seminar, Chris Hinshaw made a really good point of saying your body only goes into a state of panic when it doesn't have a regular dose of oxygen coming in. So the fact that you're learning how to breathe in line with your cadence when you're running or whatever it is that you're doing, you're basically regulating your brain and your body to sort of know when your next dose is coming in. So from a timing perspective, you like this as a musician. So you basically sort of imagine like you've got like a count of 5, but the count of 5 is when you exhale, you empty all your lungs, but you
Mm.
inhale for 4. So basically, whenever you go into a cyclical motion like that, you're trying to marry it up with your cadence that you'd be doing. So if I'm like kind of going, I don't know, let's say it's like a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You know that consistently your cadence is going to be around about like a certain number. I don't know, maybe like 160, maybe 170 strokes per minute or whatever you call it.
Yeah, that's what I do. I'm a
Yeah.
firm, like, 169, and I'm trying to slowly push it up 1 every
Yeah.
few months.
Yeah, exactly. And then you then know that if you get lost when you're running, if you suddenly start going, you just know that you've very quickly lost that cadence and that you're going more into an anaerobic threshold. So you need to
Yeah.
put it back into a rhythm. That's kind of like the best way of describing it that I can think of from the top of my head. But it's essentially just trying to create a regular rhythm so that your body is getting like a regular dose of oxygen consistently. And whenever you shorten that or it's too long, you know that you're going too far away from where you want to be.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's really interesting. I think that'll probably be, like, so helpful to a bunch of people listening that have never really thought about the 2 in relation as well. Because
Yeah.
I think naturally you try and fall into the rhythm, but it's that kind of thing, like, if you're not making an intentional effort to do it, you're not maybe doing it efficiently enough.
Yeah, 100%. Because breathing, it's something that I go through with all of my clients whenever they want to run, is sometimes obviously we breathe normally. We don't have to think about breathing, but when you're running, you do have to think about how you're breathing because so many people will just start hyperventilating and they'll be like, why are my lungs burning? Why are my legs burning up? I'm like, it's because you're hyperventilating. There's no regular dose of oxygen coming in. So it's just learning and teaching your body how to do that consistently.
Yeah, and I suppose that's a lot of time when people go from 0 to high intensity cardio on anything, it can feel really anxiety inducing and
Mm,
almost like you're having a panic attack because
yes.
we're maybe not thinking of how we control it beforehand or how we're going to attack a workout for anything that's like big capacity threshold stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's such a good point. So let's talk about nutrition. You've already touched on it about underfueling initially. I'm guessing you hadn't fueled for runs previously, you hadn't had to. So when you were kinda learning to fuel for these distances, where was your starting point? How did you go in? Was there any major, like, trial and errors or breakthroughs aside from just needing to do it earlier?
Yeah, definitely fucked up way too many times just by thinking, I'll just give it a go, crack on, let's just see what happens. I knew from the top of my head, I knew that obviously having things like gels and everything come into the picture were going to be important. But I also knew from experience my stomach is not the best with some stuff. So I was like, I definitely need to sort of test out what gels and stuff. So when I first started, I knew that obviously you have to have things like that in place. So I researched online in terms of like hydration and fueling, and I came across, I think I sent it to you in the past, precision
That's who
fusion
I've used
hydration.
since you sent me that as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, honestly, they're so incredible. So I knew that I'm a salty sweater, so I knew that I obviously had to replace electrolytes and then I had to make sure that I had a fueling strategy. of some form based on like my weight and how long I was going for and stuff like that. So I just started out by kind of just winging it and seeing what happens. Hence why at one point I got sucked into thinking I'll wait until halfway, then I'll start fueling. It's just don't do that. And then obviously from making that mistake, I felt the bonk. Well, I felt the pain of the bonking really, really hard.
I love that you're calling it a bonk. I'm never going to refer to it as anything other than that now.
Yeah. When that happens, you're like, oh man, I've just bonked. Like, oh, damn. But sometimes you need to feel the pain of the lesson in order to sort of like really apply something.
Yeah.
So since that, I researched online, and obviously lots of different individuals will say different things, but the science was leading to just making sure that you're consistently taking in carbs every sort of 30 minutes, unless you're sort of pushing like intense race pace, that time window shortened. So what I just started to do was on my runs, I would have things like Serene, Rice Krispies Squares bars, the gels, and some chews. And I would just start to have around about 15 to 20 grams of carbs every half an hour. And that seemed to work really well for me. I didn't want to get too scientific with it because I can be super neurotic. And I wanted to enjoy it as well. That's a thing, because, you know, you can get granular with the detail about, you know, you need 4 grams of carbs per kilo of, you know, body weight and everything else. And obviously for your carb load, you have to think about that. But week in, week out, I just tested it out a little bit. And, you know, I felt really, really good when I had about 20 grams per half an hour. So I just stuck to that and it seemed to work really well. And then what I would do is on my bigger runs, you know, like 30 kilometers and above, around about halfway, I'd make sure that I took on maybe about sort of like 90-ish grams, just for the fact that I depleted so much. I'd have a bit of a water break, take on some more carbs, and then continue on with the 30 minutes. Well, taking on carbs every sort of 30 minutes. And that seemed to be like the sweet spot for me, because after that, I never bonked. I felt quite good. And I also felt quite smug on some runs as well, because like, oh, I could keep going.
Easy.
Yeah, easy work.
Yeah, I think and the same fueling just never works for the same person, and the trial and error is so important. And was that what you ended up doing on race day as well, every 30 minutes, or did you kind of have to change it up because of the bigger distance?
Yeah, so because of the bigger distance, I still wanted to have like in my head, like every 30 minutes, take some fuel on board. But on the day itself, I just had to force calories in. At one point, I thought I was going to throw up. Like it was so bad, because the stress on the gut is just so high because you're accumulating so much fatigue. But ultimately, I've still got, it's in a box somewhere. Like I didn't even make it through all my chews, because there were so many times where I had so much fuel from the pit stops because it was really well fueled. I was like, actually, like, I'll just steal some of that, put it in my bag. So I just made sure that I had more variety, because to go through just gels or squares bars or just, you know, the fast acting carbs, you're going to go to the toilet real quick.
And then like flavor fatigue when you're not even feeling hungry as well, because you're so past it. It's like having to force feed, especially while you're running. It's not a good flavor, is it?
Oh no, absolutely. And you get that strange sort of furry feeling in your mouth when you've had too much sugar.
Yeah.
So just having like salty stuff like nuts and like fats and stuff like that was really good in the day as well.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, it's a great shout. Sensory wise, that's a no from me.
Yeah.
Hey, hi everyone. Sorry for interrupting this episode, and I do hope you're enjoying it. We will get back to it in a sec, but I just wanted to tell you about my Fast and Ferocious hybrid lift and run program. It's something new that I've trialed for the last month with a small group of people, and I am finally ready to open it up to more because it has been going awesome. It's your all-in-one program for getting stronger, faster, and more consistent with your training without having the guesswork. This is for anyone that's serious about lifting more, running further, and blending strength and endurance seamlessly without burning out. Training blocks that actually work, focused on strength, endurance, and running, designed to keep you progressing every week. I spend a lot of time working on the programming, and it may be one of my favorite things to do. I am an absolute program nerd. Those that know me already will know that. There is real-time support with me, and there is an optional add-on if you want a little bit more support to stay accountable. You can actually upgrade for form checks and monthly check-ins with me. We'll make sure that your lifts are on point and you're consistently showing up for yourself. So if this sounds like it might be your flavor and you're finally ready to take the next step in your training, what are you waiting for? Hit the link in the show notes and get in touch with me. and we'll get you started on the path to becoming a ferocious hybrid lifting and running monster, because that's what we all want, right? Okay, let's dive back into the episode. So moving on to race day, did it all go to plan? Were you happy with your performance on the day and everything?
Yeah, do you know what,
yeah.
mate? I was really happy, and again, I felt a bit smug.
That's so good.
I felt a bit smug, and I felt like I had, dare I say it, more in the tank. So, I've got my stats up here from the actual day, because I came 35th out of all the females, and I placed 242nd overall. And I think, hey, shush.
Rudy's like, yes.
Say, mom, go, mom. And I think there was about just maybe like 1,100 or 1,200 people that did it all together. So I was pretty chuffed with that. But the biggest thing for me in terms of the stats was that I gave myself a target of trying to get sub 18, and I got 16 and a half. So I was pretty buzzing with that.
Amazing.
But then that includes the big breaks that I had as well. So I was like, damn, I probably could have got sub 16 if I really wanted to.
But you've been a bit more like conservative with the pit stops.
Yeah, for sure. But like on the day, it was just so cool. Like you get those nerves when you're going into uncharted territory. So starting off, like I just made sure that I just didn't go out too hot, because I made that mistake in the past. But everything went to plan. Like I felt really strong. I just made sure. I think in my head, I had like a target sort of split of between 7 and 8 kilometers per hour. But if I felt like I was going too quick when I was on that, I'd just slow down. But I seemed to hold an average sort of split of like 7-11, which felt really, really good. But everything went so smooth in the day, because my biggest focus for me was just to purely enjoy it and not get wrapped up in the stress of like if something goes to plan. So I just kind of leaned on my experiences of all the runs that I'd done today, and I just knew that I'd be able to do it. It was just a case of when the going gets tough, that's when the mental side of it comes in. But physically, I had no issues. Nick, my friend, his knee I say when, but his knee started to hurt quite a lot 15 miles in.
Oh god.
So that was a bit of a bummer for him. So, there was a few times where I was holding back a little bit just to sort of stay with him, just make sure he was all right. But then we ended up splitting off because he had to basically power walk for the entire thing just to get through it, sorry. So I spent a lot of it on my own, which, it was absolutely fine because I'm a bit of a lone wolf in that. But yeah, in terms of how my body felt, how my mindset was, everything felt really, really good. There was one stretch that mentally was just stupidly difficult because it was just so understimulating in terms of the terrain. It was just purely like, I don't even know how to describe it, but it was just like, I think it was the third segment, because it basically separated them, obviously based on the pit stops, but in terms of just making sure there's different little stretches. And I think it's a stretch from Hexham to Newburn. It was absolutely chucking it down. And it was just so miserable. But my body felt fine. I think the best way to describe it was I just felt like a steam engine, just could keep going. Like, and it's as long as you sort of stay within a certain pace, like it's absolutely fine. And I'd say like the worst part was, funnily enough, the final 10 kilometers.
Yeah.
It was absolutely awful. And I'm pretty sure they played mind games as well, because they placed like a 7-mile sign somewhere. And I was like, it really threw me, because I was like, no, I've been running for like 45 minutes here. Like, there's no way that I've not even chewed up. I can't even remember how long I'd thought I'd done, but I was like, this is so fucked.
Just somebody's like accidentally left something somewhere.
Yeah. I swear. When I look back on it now in hindsight, I'm like, that was a mental test, because honestly, I questioned my sanity after seeing that sign. I was like, this is fucked. I'm not going to finish it. This is shit.
So that sign was telling you I had 7 miles to go and you felt like it was less?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I had about like 5 miles to go. And then knowing I'd been running for so long, so I was thinking, right, okay, so a mile is it 1,600 meters? I think. Yeah. And I started to tot it up in my head, and I was like, get fucked. I was like, no. I was like, no.
just deciding not to believe that.
Yeah. I was like, no, this is impossible. And I was like, shit, am I running that slow? And it was, funnily enough, that final stretch from the Newburn pit stop, that is where most people, when they get into that pit stop, that's where most people stop and they
Really?
drop out. Yeah.
Was it that close as well?
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's like is it like a 10K? Yeah, it's like the final 10K, maybe just over. But yeah, it's so sad because I think the fatigue for so many people is already so high mentally and physically. And don't get me wrong, I could feel it at that point, but I was like, I can do this. Like head torch had to go on because it started getting darker. So that also played a part as well with the mental headspace.
Yeah, running in the dark, especially on your own in the cold it's not, I don't know, there's not really a way to like enjoy that for what it is, but then at the same time, like I've watched so many ultra documentaries where people just go to very dark places, especially when they're on their own. Did you hit any walls? How did it feel running in the dark with the head torch on your own for that long?
Do you know what? It was pretty shit in all honesty. Like you just mentally, the fear just comes in straight away because I was actually looking, I was checking back, I was like, there's actually not many runners around me. And I was like,
Yeah.
if someone just comes out the bush and just tries to do something, I'm like, I'm fucked. Like my
Yeah, because you
fatigue is
can't
through the
take
roof.
them when
Yeah,
you're that tired.
yeah. And that's what I was thinking. I was like, right, okay. And I was starting to panic and I was looking for people's head torches in the distance and I was looking back and there was a stretch where we kind of came through these bushes, and it was pretty dark in there. And I'm like, fuck, I'm like a woman's running through this stretch on my own. Like, and it's, the anxiety definitely got up there. So yeah, that was definitely the most mentally challenging part of that last little bit in terms of like the environment changing, it being dark. But in terms of like dark places with the fatigue getting so high, I remember because the run itself, you start in Carlisle and you finished at Newcastle on the quayside. And I remember coming onto the what I imagine is the very beginning of the sort of path that takes you all the way up to the quayside with all the bridges and stuff. And I remember thinking, right, okay, I haven't got long to go, but when you're joining it from the very beginning, you can't even see the quayside. And I was just getting so mentally in my head, I was like, I can't do this. Like the pain, my left foot, I could barely flex my foot, like because there was just so much pain in there. I think just from lactic acid just building all day from me sort of going through that pattern. And I was like, this is absolutely agonizing. The hips started to feel super, super sore. And the funny thing is that all the way up until that point prior to getting to Newburn, you only really feel your hips are sore once you sit down. So once you start running again, you kind of feel like a a really sort of rusty train where you kind of have to get everything going to like rub off all the shit on them.
Yeah.
So you feel better once you start running. But then by that point, the hips felt like they were starting to just, I don't want to say give way, but it felt like there was a lot of wearing going on because they're so sore. So there was definitely like a good couple of miles where I was like, this is it. This is where I tap out. Like I'm done. I'm done for.
But you didn't.
I did not. I did not. No, I didn't. I kept going. And my little brother was so cool, bless him. So he was tracking me the entire day. And he said that he'd run the last little bit with me on the quayside.
Nice.
So, I got to a point and then I saw the quayside and I was like, shit, I was like, it's here. But it just goes to show that when you're in your own head, like you kind of just sort of zone out and you don't really see anything around. You're just trying to focus on one step in front of the other when it's that bad. And then once I saw my little brother in the quayside, I was like, right, I'm literally almost there now. So then
Yeah.
that pushed me through to the end. So it got pretty dark in that last push.
I bet. With you mentioning your brother, that brings me on to next couple of questions. Did you kind of take a bit of a crew and like how far did you have in between them all? And did your people meet you at each one?
Yeah, so do you know what? We had an epic setup, and I think it made me really appreciate you cannot do big things like this by yourself. Like, or
100%.
if you do, it's just going to be so much more miserable. Like, you need a good support crew, like, because it's just so good for your spirits. So, my little brother met me at the end there, but in terms of the support crew that we had, so Nick's mum and stepdad drove all the way up, and they met us at I think it was it the very first pit stop? Not the first one, sorry, the second one, Walltown Quarry. Oh no, the third one, the Sill. So basically, they'd driven up there. They brought like a truckload of like food for the entire remainder of the race, even though there
Amazing.
was a pit stops already. But when we got there and we saw them, it was so awesome because we were just like, man, like there's all this food here. Like it's nice to see people that we're familiar with. So that was Nick's mum, his stepdad, and his brother. And it was just so, so nice because when you're just hanging out of your ass, you need all of the sort of energy and support that you can get. And the pit stop distances themselves, from what I remember, the first one was like 15 miles in. And I think after that, there was around about the same distance apart from Hexham to Newburn, or maybe from the Sill to Hexham, because there's one in particular where it took everybody around, well, I say everybody, most people, about, I think it was a marathon, and I think it was from the Sill to Hexham because that was like a long slog that was like really arduous. So they kind of made it so that the first two were like similar-ish distances around 15 miles. And then you had like quite a big chunk in between the other one. So it's like a real test. Yeah, like the mental fatigue like really, really kicked in. But then, yeah, they from the Sill forward, that was like 3 pit stops. The remaining 3 pit stops, we definitely needed them there because my word, when you get to Newburn, you're like, your head's gone and you're just like, shit, this is like incredible that you're here. Like a warm car, just sitting in there, taking your shoes off for a couple of minutes.
Yeah.
Just someone just actually just saying, you know, you're fine, just crack on, you're smashing it. Like, and then at the end, having everybody there at the same time. Those guys stayed in the hotel in Newcastle because, you know, some people weren't coming up to the the finish line until around about 11:30. So just the fact that they were there, stayed over, and we all had breakfast the next day. We could barely walk.
I bet.
Yeah.
How long did you sleep for?
Oh, the sleep after. Mate, honestly, I wish I could tell you that I slept like a baby and that I slept for like 12 hours. But I remember we got to the hotel and all, bless them, they all like helped us carry our bags because I couldn't even walk. This is like, it's a joke. But when I lay down in the bed, even lying on my back on my side, I was in so much pain, I just couldn't relax. So I had lots of broken sleep, whereas Nick was just like out for the count.
Just KO'd, yeah.
Yeah, just KO'd. So I think we didn't set an alarm. We tried to get around about 8-9 hours. And you know, even though it was really broken, I could tell that my body had some repair and restoration, but still absolutely nowhere near what I needed.
How long did that recovery take? How long before your body felt normalish?
You know what? It took a good couple of weeks. Like the first week in particular, I remember I'd booked the Monday off coaching in the gym, was back in on the Tuesday, and walking to work on the Tuesday, it's like a downhill as well. I was like, what have I done here? But yeah, it definitely took a couple of weeks because your nervous system is just so fried. And then it took my foot, my hips, my knees, like a good few days to feel normal. So for that first week after the ultra, the only thing that I did training wise was I jumped on the watt bike for like 10-15 minutes, just purely to try and get some blood flow through the legs. I did like one upper body session on the Thursday, maybe the Friday. Again, that was just purely just getting some movement in and just getting some blood pumping. And then the next week, I was just slowly sort of trying to trickle training back in and getting time on the feet. But I think I went for like a very, very small run at the back end of the second week because I started to feel a bit more normal, but resented running after that.
Yes. Like, fuck this. Would you do another one?
I
would
would.
do another one.
Yeah, I would. You know what? And funnily enough, after everybody does this, you know, after you do like a big race, something, you're like, let's do another one. Let's go. I in my head initially, I was like, right, I'm going to do a 100 miler. That's the next thing. And I'm not putting it off, but I did get caught up in thinking like, right, okay, the next thing, just go, go, go. And I was like, actually, just pull back from it a little bit and just do something that you just want to do rather than feel like you have to do the 100 miler. I'll definitely do another one. But the challenge that me and Nick are going to do next year is a 24-hour up and down Snowdon as many times as possible.
Oh, nice. That's awesome.
Yeah, because it's a good mixture of like mountainous terrain, seeing the outdoors, and trail running, hiking-ish.
Yeah.
And that's actually one of the UTMB series races that can get you points for the Mont Blanc race.
I was gonna say isn't that like almost like your entryway? That's
Yeah. Pretty much. And you know, I don't know if I'll ever do something like that. I mean, it'd be cool, but it's just, you know, the lottery for that and just the time commitment is just insane. But yeah, I definitely do another one. And even, you know, going through all the notes for this and sort of like looking back at everything and like watching some docos, it gets you amped up. It gets you so amped up.
Totally. I live on YouTube ultra documentaries. It's the best.
It's so
Like
cool.
it's the same format again and again for everyone that does them, no matter which one they do. But I will just never get bored of hearing people talk about it and watching that stuff. It's amazing.
Oh yeah. I mean, you've heard of Courtney DeWalter, right?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna say yeah, yeah.
It's when you fall into like the hole of people doing the Barkley Marathon. Like, that it's just another level. Like, the Barkley Marathon blew my mind when I found out about it because you also have to read a map and, like, find things. It's like a
Oh
scavenger hunt. Ultra
yeah.
marathon is terrifying.
Yeah, it's insane, and I think, like, since getting into the ultra world and seeing what sort of events they have in America, I'm like, that is just a different beast. Like,
Yeah, what is it? Is it Leadville 100 that everybody tends to do? That
yeah,
looks amazing, but also, like, the preparation and the stuff that you got the support that you need to do it, and not to mention the fact, like, doing this kind of stuff is pretty expensive.
yeah, yeah. I was just about to say, like, it's the the fueling month in, month out. I was like, Jesus, like this is that precision nutrition, love me right now, and they're like getting all the carbs in.
Yeah, the amount of fuel, food, washing. It's like,
Yeah, yeah, and
what?
even, like, the clothing on the runners, like, because, again, I'd done a couple of runs where I'd wore suboptimal stuff, and the chafage, oh my god,
Oh, yeah.
so, so bad. So it's just making sure that you've actually got good kit, which is a shame because I want it to be the case where anyone can do it, which anyone can, but obviously from a financial perspective, if you can't afford to get good kit, it's gonna be a little bit of a barrier, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think that's what's a shame, I suppose, because running is genuinely quite accessible. You don't need the most expensive shoes in the world, but then when you start getting into like the kind of leisurely athlete and the longer distances and like some of the costs of some of the comps and stuff as well, it's almost like there is going to be a barrier to entry, unfortunately. But then at the same time, a lot of people dedicate their life to it, and a lot of people more just leisurely like to do it. And I guess that makes sense. But it would be cool if it was a bit easier for people to get better kit, I suppose, that can't afford it because they're missing out on that, allowing them to like maybe take things to the next level, maybe.
Yeah, 100%. Like, just to give you context, my ticket for that ultra was like £250.
Yeah.
And then I know you can do installments, which is really, really cool, but still, like, not everybody has like 250 quid or like has the space to think, right, okay, I've got these monthly installments for this plus getting the runners, and it can add up really quick. But
Yeah, what's an Ironman? Isn't that like 650 or something? And you've not even got all your shit that you need for like
yeah,
the I was gonna say the outfit, but you know what I mean.
yeah, the gear,
Outfit.
honestly, it's the most expensive sport. It's like the price of a holiday, and they're doing one in Leeds.
Yeah, it's where I walk Aubrey.
Oh man.
And I said as soon as I saw it was announced, I texted my coach Tom and said, "Don't let me enter that because I'm not ready." Like, this bike has never been outside.
Yeah,
Just Swift.
yes. Get the mileage indoors.
Yeah, for those listening and not watching, I'm just pointing to my bike saying I've never taken it outside. I just ride it
Yes.
inside because I'm Nesh. But yeah, I think it's like if you're looking at triathlons, I keep wanting to say you need 3 different outfits, but you know what I mean? You need your
Yeah.
wetsuit, you need like your cycle bib, you need your cycling shoes, you need your runners. You can just spend absolutely thousands all on one race. So maybe an ultra marathon is a bit easier on the wallet than a triathlon.
Yeah, I think it definitely is, and I think there's a reason why so many middle-aged rich guys are getting into doing Ironmans over and over again because it's they work hard for a really high salary, but then they're like, right, well, I'll start doing Ironmans to spend all my money.
Yeah, it's like it's the new midlife crisis, isn't it?
Yeah,
It's like they don't buy the sports car, they just do an Ironman and get like a 5 grand bike instead.
yeah, exactly. Like they're just comparing bikes at the start line, going, "Huh, peasant."
Yeah. To be fair though, I am excited that there is an Ironman in Leeds because it's like it's so close to my house. I think some of my coaching team are doing it, so I will go and watch them all. But
Yes.
I will just wish that I had signed up. But I'm really glad that I haven't, and I'm not letting myself until I've got more of my other things in the bag.
Yeah.
But were you tempted when you saw it?
You know what? I was because I did say to myself, I was like, "Oh, maybe the next thing's an Ironman," but because I just experienced the the sacrifice and time from the ultra, I just knew it was going to be too soon. I was like,
Yeah.
I need to give myself a good couple of years of just doing different goals, similar within the endurance world. But again, the kit, I was thinking, well, it's going to be expensive for the kit, and it's best off getting the kit cheap, trying that style of training and seeing if you love it first before going
100%.
straight into booking the Ironman. Because like I've never done like a sprint try or a triathlon, so I've got to tick those off first before I commit to doing an ultra. But yeah, it's definitely on my radar, but probably not for a good few years.
Yeah, that's what I have to keep telling myself every time I see something new that I want to try. I'm like, you can't do everything in the same year, and you
Yeah.
can't just keep doing everything like 6 months apart, like just one little thing at the time. But it's so easy for your mind to just get too excited, and it's like, well, we do have the rest of our lives to do it as long as we're training for long-term health in between. So
Yeah,
it's like,
exactly. And we have the benefit when it comes to endurance, you actually start to peak like over time as you get older rather than in being a young gun. So, we've got time on our side.
what age are you meant to peak for like kind of endurance training? Do you know?
I'm pretty sure it's like 35 and above, like, because
Oh,
if you
got
yeah.
time.
Yeah, exactly. You've got all the time in the world. Like, if you think about it as well, because like endurance is the capacity is built over time. So like, and I'm pretty sure it's something to do with like your muscle fibers changing as you get older as well. But you'll know from all the ultra docos, but how many people in their 50s and 60s are still smashing out ultras?
Yeah, and they're always like the people that win it for the most part, like will be older athletes as well. I
Yeah.
was watching some of the like New York Marathon vlogs are starting to come out now. There was a guy from like Connecticut in the background of someone's video just screaming, being chasing like a sub 240 marathon, and he just looked like he was out for a jog. Like it was so chill. It's that sort of thing, like feeling like you have to be in a rush to do everything, but actually
Mm,
being like, actually, I don't.
yeah.
And I think like I don't know, when you come from like an entertainment world or a music world or fashion world, age can be a lot, but it seems like just in general, age isn't a determining factor for anything now. People aren't thinking of it in the same way, which is quite nice.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Like longevity. And that's one thing that's changed within my sort of focus and training as well. Cause I definitely got wrapped up in that. But huge thing for me now moving forward with my training. Yes, I want to see what my potential is, but I want to do it with an underlying focus on longevity and quality of life. Like that's the biggest shift.
Yeah, so you can still do it when you're 60.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
100%. Barkley Marathon when you're 60.
Yes, there we go.
So to finish off with, I want to talk about any mistakes or do-overs, or like, is there anything that you would change about anything that you did, or like any mistakes that you'd rectify, any sort of little nuggets that you would pass on to someone based on your prep for that ultra?
Going back in with my view and outlook on, fucking up and like failing, so to speak, I had to see it as feedback. So I wouldn't change anything. But that's still on the basis that I changed and I adapted it. So if I was doing the same thing over and over again, I would definitely go back and change some bits. But yeah, I think with that outlook, I wouldn't go back and change anything. And I think, the biggest fuck ups for me when I look back on it was just failing to prepare. Like preparation is everything, and like admin's not a dirty word. So you just need to make sure that rather than just guesstimating things and just sort of winging it. Don't get me wrong, when you first start, you'll have to do a little bit of that. But if you want to enjoy it, like truly enjoy it, there has to be like a little bit of planning in there as well. Some of my biggest fuck ups from doing that as well. Oh my God, doing a full marathon on the Leeds Liverpool Canal.
Really?
Why?
Why? It's just straight. Is that a bad thing?
It's straight, yeah, but it is so, oh my God, it's so soul destroying because it's not scenic in the slightest.
I did my last long run on there, but it was like 15K. So it wasn't anywhere near a marathon. So yeah, I can imagine why. It is quite
Yeah.
hard to find a place to do your long runs though, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And when I was looking through my Strava, there was one run and I put on the notes 18 kilometers all over the gaff.
Straggles.
Yeah, exactly. Because you get to the point where like, like planning the routes as well is going to be like a factor. But yeah, for sure. One of the bigger fuck ups was just sort of like doing the full marathon and then leave Liverpool Canal. Because there's just better ways to do that. And I think maybe potentially booking a race for that full marathon might have been better so I could create memories like the half marathon. Like I don't know why I didn't book a marathon, maybe because the timing, because everything had to kind of align with the reverse engineered plan of getting towards the big day. So maybe it was because of that. And then, another one, I mentioned it before, but thinking that it was a good thing to own the fuel when you're about halfway through a run. No.
Fair.
Yeah. You definitely have to sort of fuel as soon as possible, really. And I think actually looking back again, like doing my half marathon in my ultra shoes, like I think in my head, I thought, well, I just need to get used to wearing my ultra shoes.
Yeah.
But knowing what I know now, because it was the first time that I was touching that distance and it was like, again, like a benchmark distance, I just thought, well, I'm going to aim for 2 hours, but I'm not going to go out hell for leather. But in hindsight, it probably would have been better to wear some carbons for that one, just so that I could actually just, with it being a shorter distance, I say shorter, it's still half marathon. it just gives you that ability because of the intensity you run at some points. It just gives you that ability to sort of have a bit of energy return. So I think I probably could have run in my carbons for that. And don't do 10-kilometer time trials on a treadmill.
No, it's just for your own sanity or a different
Yes.
reason.
Yeah, 100%. And then in terms of like specific golden nuggets, speed work and VO2 max work matters just as much as time on your feet. So don't neglect that. Like, because you have to have like a variety of conditioning pieces to get all round aerobic capacity. So it's no good just getting time on your feet and just doing long, slow, steady runs. Like you've got to do the speed work because that's what's going to give you the ability to recover, get stronger capillaries, have stronger lungs. Like that is just as important as the long, slow stuff. So don't neglect that. And mindset is everything. Like, it can work for you or against you. And when you learn how to reframe negative thoughts as they come up, which it will do, especially during speed work.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it will just change the game. And I think it'll just make the journey so much more rewarding, no matter what distance you're trying to go for, whether it's your first 5K, 10K, half marathon, whatever. Like it's about the commitment and the trust you build in yourself from just doing the thing when you don't feel like doing it. So mindset's everything in that sense.
What do you tell yourself on those speed work runs?
Do
How do you reframe them?
you know
I
what?
know so many people that will love the answer to this. So
Oh my God. So literally like when I'm doing those speed work intervals, I I sometimes act like people that I love, their life depends on it. So literally what I mean by that is like, I try to think of like, and this is when it hurts really, really bad. So I'm like, imagine, and I think this is coming from like the SAS stuff. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's just like you acting like lives are on the line here. But when it hurts really, really bad, I'm like, right, okay, just imagine that, my partner or my future child, like their life depends on you being able to hold your pace. And I'm like, fuck that. I'm like going faster. Like, I think I'm just wired like that. But in terms of the actual inner narrative, I still have those voices that tell me that I want to stop, I want to slow down, I want to quit. But I'm kind of gassing myself up. I'm like, no, like it's you against you. Like, come on, just do the work. Like, make yourself proud. That's one thing that keeps coming up. Make yourself proud.
I like that.
Yeah. And it's not about the splits. It's not about the time. It's about if I've set an intention in my head to hold a pace or to get to maybe a certain point in the interval, then finish strong. Then when I do that, I just feel so much better because I've done what I said I would do.
Fuck yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for just coming on and just chatting all about that process. I know you wrote down a lot of stuff, like thinking back to it because it was quite a while ago. Is there anything that we didn't cover
Um,
that you thought about that you'd want to tell me about?
I'm just having a look now. Do you know what? I think we pretty much covered everything. Yeah, raw dogging. Oh, one last thing actually, which I put down as a lesson, is that breakthroughs are built in the mundane.
Yeah.
Like they're built in the boring, and be where your feet are. And that's not mine. I coined that from Sally. Is it Sally McRae or Sally?
Sally McRae.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Be where your feet are. That's like the biggest thing that got me through that ultra journey. So that's the only two things that we didn't cover, but everything else, especially raw dogging, we covered it.
Bonking.
Yeah.
Yes, people, that was Reanne Francis, and as always, I'll put all of the links to where you can find her stuff in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate it. I'll see you in a couple of weeks' time. Those of you that might be new around here, or for those of you that might not have yet actually followed this podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or YouTube, I would really love it if you could drop me a follow. It helped me out so much. This is the #1 inclusive fitness podcast when you search for it, and it's so important for me to reach as many people as possible that need inclusive fitness content and not just the same old bullshit, toxic fitness chat and misinformation. So if you got a spare 2 minutes, drop me a follow, drop me a subscribe, and please do leave a review if you like the episode. It honestly does help me out, and it means the world as well. I know that so many people all over the world listen to this, and I am just forever grateful that this is what I get to do alongside coaching people. So have an amazing rest of your week, and I'll be back with a new episode in a couple of weeks. Take it easy, Cultivate family. That's me out. Bye.